Joining us now are the authors of In Pursuit, Journeys of African Entrepreneurship, Osarite Ngubadea and Chukuka Chukuma. In their book, the duo shared their experiences working, building and supporting businesses and exposure to multi-million-dollar projects around the world and uncovered what it takes to own, run and grow a profitable business in Africa. And we'll be telling budding entrepreneurs how they can do just that. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
I'll start with you, Osarite. While reading the preface to your book, I found this line compelling. The heart of business is human interaction. Speak to that fact, if you will, please.
So, generally speaking, business, people tend to think about products and tend to think about the commercial side of it. But a big part of it is actually the interaction between people, right? I actually read something interesting yesterday about money just being a representation of intention or representation of goods and services. And goods and services is what you receive. But to complete that cycle, you need people, right? How they interact, what one person wants and what the other person is willing to give. That interaction is what really drives enterprises and what drives commerce.
Well, Chukuka, if I could ask you a question, if we could switch to going over your experiences in two countries. We know that you've met and your friendship actually started in the United States. And if you were to compare, I guess, the business climate there to the one in Nigeria, how would somebody navigate the space of entrepreneurship? What type of similarities are there in terms of advances or difficulties in each space?
Thank you very much for that question. Obviously, regardless of where you are, relationships matter and things like integrity matter. At the end of the day, entrepreneurship, regardless of whether you're on the continent or off the continent, you got to be solving problems, right? So there's a problem that you're trying to solve that essentially helps people, and therefore they're willing to pay for that service. In terms of differences, I would say, in Nigeria or on the continent, we're very, the problems are very real, right? They seem to almost overwhelm you. I was just listening to this show now, and you had the flying doctors on, and I love their solution. They're solving a problem in healthcare. That's a big one. But what is to be said that's not the same thing as the doctors that are currently in the US or wherever else right now solving problems. So I think the heart of entrepreneurship, regardless of where you are, is solving problems. And as far as you're doing that, you can always make some good money on it.
So how do we support our young entrepreneurs so they can create jobs for themselves and for others? How best can we support them?
So I would say, one of the first problems is that not everybody is intended to be an entrepreneur, right? Not everybody needs to take that risk, which is really. Can you guys hear me? Sorry.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry. All right, sorry. Right. So not everybody is meant to take that risk, because the difference between an entrepreneur and somebody who works and has an entrepreneurial attitude is the risk levels, right? So when you walk out of your job and you start to feed yourself, which is a declaration that this idea that you have can actually feed you, is a matter of risk. So I would say the number one thing we can do for young people, I wouldn't necessarily call them entrepreneurs yet, is to provide great examples, right? Provide jobs for them to learn in, jobs for them to intern in, provide them examples so they understand the process, because that's one of the things that's really missing. There's a lack of understanding of what the process is from, when you have an idea to when you actually execute the idea and when the idea becomes a commercial endeavor. What we have is a sense of, things happen very quickly, and that leads people to the wrong direction. So I believe if for instance, writing this book was our contribution to that exact initiative, right? Because we believe that entrepreneurs should start from a position where they learn, right? Learning is like a free school. You're learning for an employer, and is giving you guidance on how to better execute your ideas. So I think providing jobs and giving good examples is critical.
Also, Richard, you talked about risks now. With the pandemic in play, health-related risks will be front and center in investment talks around all the deal rooms, right or wrong?
Did you say health?
Yes. Health-related risk factors will be on the table, no?
No, definitely, yes. How we work has definitely been disrupted, right? How we interact is definitely disrupted. I had a conversation with somebody who was going to offer me services a couple of weeks ago, and we both felt awkward on should we even shake our hands. So I can imagine, when you think about, especially, if you're the kind of entrepreneur who, you're very personable, right? So if your transactions are done on a one-to-one basis or a people-to-people basis, you would have to learn new toolkits, new skills on how to be able to close the transactions with the new, mode of operation, the new way people will operate with each other, because people want to keep the distance. So health is definitely. I mean, for instance, board meetings are all now happening, via like this interview. We'd rather be in the studio, but we're doing it virtual means.
Absolutely. Well, Chukuka, if we could just buttress off of Oswald's point there, he talks about there being risks associated with entrepreneurship and the reality that not everybody can be an entrepreneur or a successful entrepreneur. And I think that one of the determinants of somebody's success in this way would be the climate of the country you're currently in. So if we were to use Nigeria as an example, we know that the ease of doing business rankings for Nigeria hover around 130. That's out of 190 countries. If we put that in context, I think Nigeria has gone up more than a dozen spaces across the year. But again, on its face, those numbers aren't the greatest. So again, for somebody here in Nigeria wanting to capitalize off of the mass of the population that we have here, there are still going to be difficulties that are out of their control, like ease of doing business rankings. So how does somebody navigate that space?
I think that depending on who you are and what solution you're looking for. So the first thing is the risk factor, to figure out whether it's a risk you want to take. If you've gone over that hump, within the context of working in Nigeria, you really have to know your research. You got to, obviously know your trade, right? Whatever it is you're looking to do, you got to be very good at that. But whatever solution you're going after, a problem you're trying to solve, you really have to tackle it with a very local eye, right? So you can't sort of adopt things from a foreign place for the Nigerian market. The Nigerian market is very specific. Sometimes when people talk about doing business in Africa, they talk about it in very general terms. But I find that in Nigeria in particular, whether it's issues with, dealing with state government in terms of, the registration and filings and taxes and things like that, there's sometimes quite a lot of friction between, the state and some of these entrepreneurs. But ultimately, as you sort of seek doing business in Nigeria, relationships are very important. Things like, how do you raise your first capital, right? Who do you go after? The VC market is definitely developing quite fast, and you're finding a number of people able to raise money easier, but it's still a very difficult slog. And in terms of the actual market itself, right? We have language barriers. We have challenges with things like human capital. So finding the right partners, finding the right teams are going to be things that make or break your business. If you can find the right partners and find the right teams of people to work with, then you probably have a much higher chance of success.
Chukuka, you made a good point there. Many investors hesitate to get into an environment where political risks raise their barrier to success. How do you advise people to mitigate these risks?
So the higher the risk, the higher the return, right? There's a reason why dealing in markets like ours, frontier markets / emerging markets, tend to yield you much higher returns than other places. But in terms of how you tackle it, I think, if you look at MTN success, they started out on the right foot. They came into the market. They knew they were coming in from South Africa. They knew they didn't know the local terrain. And the very first thing they did was they struck out on partnerships. They got, 6 very good Nigerians from 6 geopolitical zones, and that already got them in the right position. Recently, Oswald and I, went into the markets to talk to the real entrepreneurs on the ground, your traders, your street vendors. And what we find is that a lot of those people should actually be in boardrooms. And what do I mean by that? If you're trying to devise a marketing strategy for, conquering the consumer market, you want to do some kind of FMCG product, it behooves you, because that product is going to be going to ultimately people like this, a sort of large play, bottom of the pyramid play. It behooves you to actually spend time with those people, understanding their unique, interests of a Jimo and Aliyu, and Akaite, these people are real people. But until you understand them intimately, until you understand their struggles, how they move around in traffic, how they, live, how do you then design products for them? So a lot of times with Africa, you find we're just sort of adopting things that happened somewhere in the globe. You know what I mean? Even if you think of our book, the reason for the book is you need something that is local that you can read and understand how to do business in this current environment, as opposed to adopting, you're trying to set up something and say a tech hub in Yaba, but you're trying to adopt something that they did in Silicon Valley, where people are talking about having used their credit cards and garages, things that just don't exist in Nigeria. So you have to localize the experience, and that's why this is important.
Well, looking at In Pursuit, it's definitely an eye-catching book. Colorful, the red, you've got the boxing mitts there. Talk us through the process of putting this book together. I know it's about entrepreneurship, but the process itself, I guess, would be an example of that synergy and collaboration that you're talking about being so important in the area of entrepreneurship. So what was that process like?
So when we had the idea of writing a book, we didn't realize we were actually starting a new company. That's one of the largest takeaways for me. I just thought, we put, pen to paper and we get 10 chapters and voila, we're done. We didn't realize we actually had to set up all the infrastructures that you would need to make the book successful. And one of the things we also wanted to do was we wanted all parts of the process to be done in Nigeria. So the marketing team, the design team, all local entrepreneurs in Nigeria, trying to get their business off the ground or basically starting new businesses, but they have the skill, which we are managing to produce this product. The book cover itself, which we're very proud of, we believe signifies the experience, right? Because the book is really about the experience, right? So it signifies the experience of being an entrepreneur in Africa, right? The day-to-day struggle, the battle from the office to the street, because we believe there are several types of entrepreneurs, like Chuka just mentioned, and we wanted to be able to present the struggle that everybody gets to be able to take something from the book. So the book pretty much covers most phases and most type of entrepreneurs, so that every entrepreneur who touches the book leaves the book laughing, potentially maybe crying a little bit, but definitely, but definitely learning something. That's what's critical to us. We tend to laugh to ourselves that we want people to be tricked into learning something, right? But really have a good giggle at our expense.
Oswald, let me interrupt you there. It's time for us to take a short break, rather. And when we come back, we'll continue this conversation. Please do stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. We are still joined by Sarafa-Yusuf Oswald, Goabadia, and Chukuma. They're both authors of Journeys of African Entrepreneurship in Pursuit. Before we went on break there, gentlemen, I think we were talking to Oswald, and he was talking us through the cover of the book. I know that I had asked you about the process. If you could continue on that point.
Okay. So, like I said, the cover basically expresses the emotion, the emotive of being an entrepreneur in Africa, the general struggles. And I also mentioned before we had the break that one thing that was important to us is we did the book. Most aspects of the book was done in Nigeria. The design for the book, the design of the layout of the book, and editing was all done by Africans and on the continent, which we thought was a great way to build on the ecosystem. We also, wanted people to get something from it. So like I was saying before with the break is that, one of the things that we wanted to happen was that people would laugh with us, cry with us, and ultimately learn something from the book.
Generally speaking now, I believe that African companies can and will arise from times of crisis. I also think that new markets will evolve in line with changes in how consumers use technology, and so forth. What are the sectors that you feel are well positioned for the future with respect to attracting customers and also capital? I can readily think of remote training, decentralized collaboration, remote medicine, food production. What other areas are you thinking of?
You know what's interesting?
Yes.
Something like even, which we've been exporting for a while now, film. Netflix greenlit something like 7 movies in Nigeria, movies and series earlier this year. And, right now they're all in the writer's room sharing their stories with the LA team. and working through. But if you just look at that as an industry, I mean, the government has done a good job in putting together some funding available for the media and entertainment industry. But the truth is, we're far from where we need to be when you think of the entire food chain. So we need tons more distribution, right? Actual cinemas and cinema houses. We still need a lot of equipment, right, to be able to shoot more stuff locally. And out, you need studios to do stuff in. So that's one area. The other area is obviously on the agri side, right? We're going to need to take agriculture a lot more seriously. I mean, we've done quite a bit already, but whether it's on food security, whether it's things like storage facilities. So if you think of real estate, most people just think of residential and commercial, but there's industrial, right? So you need places across Nigeria that are strategically located where you can store stuff, so that by the time I'm going to ShopRite or somewhere in Lagos, Spa in Lagos, that I don't have a problem with my fruit having, taken a beating along the way coming from the north. You've also, you've already mentioned medicine, but even medicine, there's so many areas of it that are so important. You mentioned telemedicine already. Even this whole schooling thing, right? We have to think of schooling significantly differently. I mean, if you are someone who is skilled and you can teach, you can literally, you don't need a visa anymore. You literally can sit in Lagos with your brain cells and work in Canada or work wherever you want and earn foreign currency sitting in Lagos, because at the end of the day, your skills are now global and you can go on Zoom and actually sell those skills. So I think it's actually, it's interesting. My pastor said something like, vision is what will matter as we go forward and experience will matter less. And that's really just say, because we're transiting from the sort of area where, it was about your CV and your location and, what you had done, we're going to a place where actually no one has actually been, right? There's all these post-COVID experts. Well, the truth is nobody actually knows what's going to happen. And so, where we are going, even the young and, the less experienced can actually do very well simply because they have vision.
As you said, we really don't know what's coming next. But what we do know, the emerging consensus is that liquidity will be relatively scarce, at least up till 2021. Investors will take more time to decide on deals, and then there'll be a lot more ghosting. How do you go around these?
If I may just tackle investing. So the funny thing about money, when you've studied it for as long as I have, is that the assumption is that a recession means there's no money, and a boom means there's lots of money. And that's actually not necessarily the case, because money doesn't evaporate. It's just that more people, fewer people have it. There are people that are frugal, right? And they don't spend all their money. They keep money in buckets. We talk about this concept in the book. They keep money for buckets. So if you want to go on a skiing trip in 2 years from now, and if you wanted to go on a summer trip this summer, assuming you could travel, and you've been saving for it 3 years ago, it doesn't matter that there's COVID. You may still decide to go on that trip. And then everybody's going to be wondering, how the hell is, Modele and Adefemi, how are you guys able to travel? Well, you planned for it 3 years ago. So right now, all that's going to happen is there's going to be lots of M&A, which is, mergers and acquisitions. If you have a very good balance sheet, you've been saving money, you're Amazon, you got lots of cash in the bank, all you're going to be doing is buying up and gobbling up people, right? So it's a bit of a misnomer when for us finance people, we know that. But for normal people, you think of it and say, oh, we're in a recession, therefore global crisis, there's no money. That's not the case. All that will happen is the bigger guys will get much bigger, and a lot of the smaller guys will quote unquote disappear.
Well, I think that is definitely a true and accurate reflection of what we're seeing currently. And I know that none of us here or where you are fortune tellers, can tell the future. But looking ahead, how do you think business activity, entrepreneurship will be able to withstand this current climate?
Well, I believe, like Chuka just mentioned about vision. I think most entrepreneurs right now are trying to figure out what their next steps are. The mantra of innovate or die is realer than ever. Recently I saw at the hotel in Abuja has turned their parking lots into outdoor theater. So we have to look at how we can transition our businesses to do what's next in this new up and coming, business environment. What does it mean for real estate, right? What does it mean for offices? What does it mean for staff, coming into the office or not coming into the office? What's the impact of that on commercial real estate for offices? What does that mean for data centers? They obviously will get larger, right? Because now you have a different kind of capacity. So people have to sit and look at their business and say, okay, in this new decentralized mode that is approaching us, how does my business survive this? What's my new product? How do I shift my product? How do I adjust my product to meet the new needs, right? Because you are in business to meet needs. So how do you adjust your business to meet needs? And, one of the things we address in the book is very clearly this, right? It's not a must situation, right? If your business is not equipped or not in the position to move forward, then you should look for something else to do, right? It's not necessary. It's not a must. You must not continue, right? You could just simply down your tools and go do something different. And that's pretty much what we're trying to address the book.
You advise both mature and emerging organizations on their IT transformational goals and business development opportunities. What are you telling them to prepare for life after this pandemic?
What's interesting about that is that I think sometimes we push strategy without understanding the full, robust sense of why we're pushing the strategy, right? So we know that this is good for the business, and we say do this because you need. So to give an example, not to ramble on the point. So the point is, for the last couple of years, we've been pushing things like remote work, right? Microsoft 365, and things like that. And I've had more than one client who has just said, thank you. That's the phone call I got. Thank you, because we basically saved the infrastructure by having rolled out that implementation a year ago. So they've gotten used to using it. So pretty much working from home was almost seamless for them. So organizations that did that were better prepared for this COVID period. And I think organizations that didn't are now trying to understand how they can quickly catch up and how they can work going forward, right? So from a technology perspective, we're basically trying to help them put together the infrastructure they need to do remote work, to have their files on their phones, to have their files easily accessible and things like that.
We have a minute left. And there was something the both of you gentlemen mentioned and touched upon in your answers during this conversation, was that not everyone can be an entrepreneur. Personally triggered by that, because business entrepreneurship hasn't always been a strong suit for me. But how can somebody identify that? Like, how do you know? How can someone who perhaps think they would make a great entrepreneur, how could they tell the difference between whether or not they could do that? Very briefly.
Very briefly. So when I used to have a job and I started in that job, I found myself doing entrepreneurial things. And what does that mean? That means that when I was told my time to go home was 7 p.m. and I chose to stay till 11, I was doing that not because I thought I was going to get paid extra time, but I was doing that because I felt one day I would be able to run my own business, and I wanted to learn more than just my task. Because obviously, if you're sitting in a job, you're doing one of 300 things that the company may deliver. But if you go out and do that business yourself, you won't know the 299.
Sadly, we have run out of time. But I know that you'll be able to finish that point with us at another time. So Oswald and Chukuka, who are the authors of In Pursuit, thank you very much for your time.